Tom.
Yeah.
Tonight, the main event, Brian?
Yeah.
All right, let's get ready to rumble. Not 5, but 6 contestants on stage. Tom, what are we looking for?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Of course, the 6th being Patrick Brown, who's mayor from the Toronto area, who's running as a candidate. And he just sat out the last one, which is just a way of reminding folks that the first one that we saw, which was a bit of a cage fight, that was not an official debate. It was put on by a right-wing institute, and it had 2 people there, moderating, but they were doing anything but moderating. They were clearly on side with Pierre Poilievre. So we'll see whether Poilievre changes his style a little bit tonight. I believe he will. It was so completely over the top what he did the last time. It only pleases his base, but that's just supplying fodder for the other parties for the next campaign if he becomes the leader. Because if he continues to say crazy stuff like that the Bank of Canada is financially illiterate, even though he has no training in this area, he knows more than the Bank of Canada, and he wants to bring in Bitcoin. If he keeps saying crazy stuff like that, then he's undermining himself long term. I think he's pretty well got this thing in a lock right now, unless somehow he really messes up and people start to look differently at him. Charest, of course, is a much more appealing candidate to anybody who actually wants to form government. And I don't think that Pierre Poilievre is ever going to be the Prime Minister of Canada. But right now, that political party, the Conservatives, they were so upset when they thought they had Trudeau and Scheer lost. They were so upset when they thought they had Trudeau and O'Toole lost. Now they figure that they've got this guy, Poilievre, who's somehow, miraculously, going to form a government of a G7 country with the type of stunts that he's been pulling so far. I don't see it in the cards, but it seems that the Conservatives want to give themselves a bit of pleasure, and that's all that counts for them right now.
I'm kind of looking forward to the format tonight. So a 2-hour debate, 5 sections. But the first section, they're going to have 45 seconds to complete the sentence, "My vision for Canada is," and they're not allowed to mention the name of any other candidates or any other political party leader. Tom, this seems very unusual to me.
Well, not only is it unusual, it's original. And you have to start thinking of ways of getting them to talk in terms other than, denouncing their adversary. And you know what? It's going to be hard for some of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in particular it's going to be hard for Poilievre. But, the same way that the commission that's in charge of the debates for federal general elections just came up with a report today, yesterday actually, it was in the papers today. And they said, look, we want these debates to be a little bit less about the people asking the questions, which was a real shot across the bow to Sachi Kurl, who turned one of the debates into something about her. And the last time around, it was Althea Raj who managed to turn the debate into all about her. So he said, no, this is supposed to be a debate where you get to measure the political candidates. So let's see whether the Conservatives can pull that off tonight. The last time around, the fake debate, the one that they had in Ottawa, which was home turf for Poilievre, I mean, come on. There were such obvious parti pris. They were so favorable to Poilievre that I don't think that it gave a real appreciation. So we'll see what the crowd is doing once they get to. We'll see what the crowd is doing once they get to Edmonton tonight.
Want to shift? We talked about this, I guess, when Stephen Guilbeault first did this. I remember you kind of questioned what's going on here. Here's a guy who was head of Equiterre. Now all of a sudden he approves Bay du Nord, which is going to be the biggest project we've had of its kind in this country. Yeah. And now finally there's some pushback on this. So this is not a surprise, I guess.
Well, it is a surprise just how quickly it's coming, and it's from some of the same groups that he used to work with and for. I mean, Stephen Guilbeault, without putting too fine a point on it, has completely sold out. He approved this project. It's not just any old petroleum project offshore. I mean, this is going to be many different, oil wells that will be punctured in the base of the ocean. Absolutely dangerous technology, and this is what these lawsuits are proving right now. I mean, none of this stuff is safe for the marine wildlife. All of the things that they were supposed to check before they approved this thing, they did not check. It's a rush job, and I have a feeling that the courts are going to be very, very tough on the Canadian government. By the way, the Norwegian company that's supposed to be doing this hasn't even taken its final decision yet, and I'm not convinced that they're going to go through with this thing.
Oh.
I was not expecting you to say that.
No, nor was I.
Well, I mean, they seem so sure about it, but I mean, they've also got to be very careful. And this lawsuit is something that's going to have, they have a big shareholders meeting coming up. I can tell you that their legal teams are going to be poring over this lawsuit. This isn't something taken by, a 10th grader who says, oh, this isn't good for the environment. These are really serious outfits with some of the best lawyers in Canada, many of whom do this pro bono. They just espouse the environmental cause, and they take care of these things. The United Nations came up with its report 48 hours before this thing, begging the countries of the world to stop having new petroleum projects, no more new fossil fuel projects, and Canada went and approved this one 2 days later. So it's another stain on Canada. We were the first country in the world to withdraw from the Kyoto Protocol, and one of only three finally. The other one was Australia, and the third was Russia. Great company. Australia just produces so much coal right now. But Canada is a real laggard. And I have to share with you that because I work a lot in and with the environmental movement, there's a real demobilization right now because so many people were pumped. Finally, a real ecologist, Stephen Guilbeault, talked the talk. He was there all the time and said, hey, this is going to finally happen. Canada's going to meet its international obligations, and we're still the worst in the G7, and it's only going to get worse with the approval of the Beijing project.
All right, let's talk about Roxham Road. So Legault is saying, Trudeau, you got to do something about this. I feel like it's just another enemy, right? Like he's always looking for someone to deflect the attention off of himself for his own failures.
Natasha Hall. Boy, I could not agree more with you. And that's exactly what this is. Identity politics. And by the way, it's not only identity politics and looking for an enemy. It's keeping away one of his adversaries, because it was actually the Parti Québécois that started in on this issue this week. And it took Legault about 3.25 seconds to jump into the fray to try to steal it back for himself, because he's been on this for a long time. And he wasn't going to give any oxygen to the Parti Québécois to be even more anti-immigrant than he is. So he's out there emoting for the ages, giving the numbers, saying this is just terrible. This is international law. Mm-hmm. This is international law that says if you're seeking asylum, you're allowed to come through and a country has to process you. And we're signatory of all of those agreements, unless Mr. Legault is saying that Quebec would not implement and respect that type of international agreement. Yes, it's tough to bring in as many as 100 people a day. He put up a number, or just based on the straight line math, saying, that would be 36,000 people in the year. Of course, we've never had anything near that. It's just a number he's putting up, again, as you correctly say, Natasha, to scare people, because that's a little bit about what this is about, isn't it? Trying to put on the worst possible face on it so that people will be very upset and vote for him.
He's already starting to do it, talking about how much it's costing the province, how much it's taxing our resources. Mm-hmm. You wonder who's going to be listening to that message.
Well, exactly. It's the usual gang of suspects. And, he's obviously tuned in to the people that he wants to vote for him. And that's why he's not going to give any breathing room to the Parti Québécois. He's stolen most of the Parti Québécois vote. Yeah. If you saw my article in today's Gazette, by the way, I talk about Caroline Saint-Hilaire, old colleague from Ottawa and from my work in French media. And she's a dyed-in-the-wool sovereignist. She'll never back down from that. Now, Legault's got her taken care of. She's going to be emceeing their big convention prior to the election. But it turns out, from all the reports I've been getting, is she's actually going to run for the CAQ. Now, she's never going to back down from being a sovereignist. Now, Legault says, no, I'm not a sovereignist anymore, but I want all the powers in immigration and language and culture, because those are my first steps. Well, the real question is towards what? And if Caroline Saint-Hilaire runs for them, then I think that it's fair to interpret the answer as being towards sovereignty. Mm-hmm. And this is something that Legault is going to have to answer for. He's not going to be able to continue to pussyfoot and pretend that he's not pushing for an independent Quebec when he's making moves like that.
I'm glad you're shining a light on it.
Yeah, and we've said that before, right? You take all the steps involved to getting there without actually saying you're getting there. And that seems to me to have been the case here all along, Tom. And I know you pointed that out in the past, but it's becoming more and more obvious by the day.
Well, Legault was nice enough to put it in an article. It was one of those set-piece things in L'Actualité magazine. And it was one of the, every party leader was giving answers to the same questions. And in his, he made it quite clear that this was a step-by-step approach.
Yeah.
And again, so what's the ultimate goal of that step-by-step approach? It can't be anything other than sovereignty, in my view.
Tom Mulcair back tomorrow morning with Andrew Carter at 7:40. Thank you, Tom.